Hello.
Hello, police.
Yeah, what's the problem, sir?
We just drove down our farm track.
Yeah.
Go and feed our pheasants. We come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it.
Yeah.
It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Now, some of the more puzzling and confusing aspects of the Essex Boys case, at least for me personally, come in the form of the motive for the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. And when I say that, I don't actually mean the legitimate motive for the murders, but what Darren Nichols told police during his early police interviews. Now, this is someone who was the getaway driver that night, someone who continued a relationship with both Michael Steele and Jack Wholmes after the murders. So you would think that this individual would have some idea at least as to why these murders took place. Yet, when Darren Nichols is arrested in May 1996 in possession of 10 kilos of cannabis resin, he tells a very odd story during his early police interviews. He claims that 2 brothers named the Mullock brothers had put a lot of pressure on Michael Steele due to money which was owed by Pat Tate. This was all concerning this dud cannabis deal which fell through, and Michael Steele had told Darren Nichols that he was getting phone calls from these 2 brothers. Now, as many of you may or may not know, the Mullock brothers, these individuals who were phoning Michael Steele in the early part of 1996, issuing these threats to Michael Steele regarding this money, these 2 individuals were actually undercover police officers posing as members of the IRA. Now, in Michael Steele's police interview, the interviewing officers are unaware of this. They don't know who the Mullock brothers are either. They've just listened to Darren Nichols' version of events where Darren Nichols has said, look, these Mullock brothers are after Steele, Tate owed money, they were putting pressure on Steele, and really the motive for these murders is the Mullock brothers. They were after Steele. So he basically had to sort them out. He had to sort Tucker, Tate and Rolfe out because of what Tate had done to these 2 brothers. Interestingly, let's look at the following statement during Michael Steele's police interview, where it states the following. DC Shakespeare says, "Do you know anybody by the name Mr. Steele of Mullock? Anything that you can tell me about that name and anybody that you may know by that name? Because it is alleged by Darren Nichols that you told him that Pat Tate, one of the men who was subsequently murdered, had the sum of £40,000 from the Mullock brothers in relation to the bad cannabis importation. And that money was obviously owed back to the Mullock brothers, and they are obviously going to be looking for their money back. Does that name mean anything to you? Do those circumstances mean anything to you that I've outlined? It transpires, I understand, from Darren Nichols, that 1/3 of the poor cannabis that you brought into the country, we say, was sellable, i.e. was of sufficient quality that you were able to make some money on it. And that Patrick Tate, he says, took those drugs up north somewhere in this country and did with that what he wanted. Well, I wouldn't imagine that you'd be very happy about that, would you, Mr. Steele?" So they are talking about the bad cannabis importation here. Money was lost, there was a lot of tension, people were out money, but on the face of things, they went to the continent, they got their money back, and, as I say, on the face of things, it all appeared to be okay. But what I can't wrap my head around is why Darren Nichols is coming up with these 2 characters, these 2 individuals as the motive for the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. This is the individuals, or these are the individuals I should say, who are threatening Michael Steele according to Darren Nichols. This isn't Tate, Tucker and Rolfe against Michael Steele. It's these 2 brothers who are putting real pressure on Tate. Tate's lying to them. He's saying that I'm going to get Michael Steele to bow down in front of you and I'm going to kill him and all this stuff. I haven't been repaid my money. But the Mullock brothers are fictitious. They don't exist. And even the interviewing officers here have no idea who the Mullock brothers are. This was all part of Operation Century. Something which actually caused a lot of outrage in court when these phone calls came to light. Now, on the face of things here, you might hear this and think to yourself, well, maybe Michael Steele actually brought into these telephone calls. Did he believe that the Mullock brothers were real? Did he have some conversation post the murders with Darren Nichols? And Darren Nichols took this information and basically concocted a story based around the Mullock brothers. But no, that's not actually what's happened here. When we take a look at the transcripts, Michael Steele states that the Blundells lent Tate £40,000. And I'm going to quote here directly from the transcripts of those undercover calls, where it states the following. Their name is Blundell, and I've been told, I don't know them, but I've been told Johnny and Eddie Blundell. They come from Essex. Now I find it odd. I find it odd that they've lent him £40,000 or given him £40,000 and you've lent him the same or given him the same amount of money. Now I find that odd. And that's all from the word of Michael Steele here. He mentions the two brothers. He mentions Billy and Eddie Blundell. They've lent Tate £40,000. So Michael Steele isn't stupid during this conversation. I think he's quite suspicious of these telephone calls. And in the comment section to my videos, at least recently, there's been quite a lot of theories put out there regarding Michael Steele's involvement with the Blundells or potential involvement with the Blundells. Did they know each other? Was there some sort of partnership there? Did they hatch a plan together to kill Tucker, Tate and Rolfe? Well, what counts against that from my perspective is exactly what we've just taken a look at there, those telephone calls. Michael Steele was incredibly suspicious of those telephone calls. He most likely knew that it was some sort of setup or his phone was bugged or they were trying to extract information from him. He wasn't stupid. He was quite switched on regarding those telephone calls. And if you look at it logically, if he was involved with the Blundells to some degree, the last thing he's going to actually do on those telephone calls is blatantly mention their names. He's not going to be saying, oh yeah, it was the Blundells that he borrowed this money off of. He's not going to be introducing those individuals to these supposed police officers or suspicious callers. He's not going to be saying their names, is he? So I think that the very mentioning of those names, the Blundells there in those telephone calls, says to me at least that there was no connection in terms of the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe between the Blundells and Michael Steele. So where exactly does this leave Darren Nichols? He's been arrested. He's put these two brothers forward as the motive for the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. And a lot of people at home, I think, will probably say to themselves, well, of course he will. He's a liar. He's a fantasist. He's trying to save his own skin. And to that, I would say, yes, I do agree to a certain extent. Darren Nichols was often treading a fine line between knowledge of the crime and actually implicating himself as being involved. But what doesn't make any sense to me is the fact that he's lying here about the actual motive. There's no reason for Darren Nichols to lie about the motive for the murders. So how has Darren Nichols got this so terribly wrong? He was the getaway driver. He was the person who was sat in the car with two blood-stained individuals driving away from Workhouse Lane on December the 6th. He has since continued a relationship with both Michael Steele and Jack Wholmes. There has been conversations which have taken place between Michael Steele, Jack Wholmes and Darren Nichols post the murders regarding what took place, why it took place, who was involved, why it had to be done. Now for me personally, either one of two things is taking place here. Either Darren Nichols himself genuinely believes in the Mullock brothers, he believes that they're real individuals. Maybe he's had some conversation with Michael Steele where Michael Steele has said to him, yeah, Christ, I keep getting these weird phone calls, these bloody threatening phone calls. These people keep ringing me up saying that Pat Tate owed the money. And he's either taken that piece of information and spun it into his own version of events and then used that or put that forward as the motive, if you will, for the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. Or he is using the Mullock brothers because he's actually afraid of mentioning the true investors. Now, according to Michael Steele, as I say, in that undercover telephone call, Michael Steele states that the Blundells put up £40,000 for Pat Tate, £40,000 for the dud cannabis deal. So could Nichols have been scared of implicating the Blundells, of mentioning their name, perhaps?
But was their reign of terror about to be challenged? And where would it lead?
One time I made a meeting with Tate because Tucker wouldn't come to the meeting. So he sent Tate. That's when I did say to him, the way you're going, you know what's going to happen. Someone's going to creep up behind you and go bump in the back of the head. I was going to do that to Tucker. And when you're with him, same's going to happen to you. And that's when he looked me in the eye and said, well, if it happens, it happens. 3 days later, it happened.
And then we have that clip that I've just played for you there. Billy Blundell calling Pat Tate and Tony Tucker to a meeting just a few days before they were killed. What I find a little bit strange about that particular interview, however, is the fact that it's almost put across as if Tucker should have been there. Tucker needs to be there. Pat Tate turns up, he speaks to Billy Blundell, and Billy Blundell basically says to him, look, Tucker's in trouble, and if you're with him at the wrong time, you're going to get it as well. You're going to be killed as well. But I'm wondering what all this is about, because according to Michael Steele, as I say, in those undercover phone transcripts, he talks about Billy Blundell lending or loaning Pat Tate £40,000. We know that Tucker invested money into that dud cannabis deal. Can't remember exactly how much it was. I think it's around 20,000. I might be wrong. But Tate certainly invested the bulk of the money. Not his own money, money that he had got from outside investors. So what was the need for Tucker to be there? Tate is the person who's borrowed this money. Tate is the person who's actually gone to see Billy Blundell. So I'm wondering where Tony Tucker fits into all of this. It's also quite interesting when you combine this with the statement given by Donna Garwood's brother. Donna Garwood being the then girlfriend of Tony Tucker. And in his statement, Donna Garwood's brother's statement, he mentions the following. I remember Donna told me once that Pat Tate had come out of prison. She said, he's only been out 5 weeks. She said that since Pat had come out, Tony had become worried about something. He had taken a bit of a low profile. He wasn't himself. Donna said he started staying in with her a lot and Tony was a bit jumpy. Donna said she thought Pat had done something which reflected on Tony, but she didn't say what. Now to me, that statement does actually make quite a lot of sense. We had Pat Tate who came out of prison. We had this deal from Michael Steele that was put on the table saying basically, look, we've got a deal of a lifetime here. You need to invest in this. And instead of Tate actually, getting his foot in after coming out of prison and sort of re-establishing himself, he jumps on this deal and puts his own money in, but then also asks for outside investment. And as I said earlier, according to this transcript of these undercover calls, the person who actually invested in this deal was the Blundells. So Tate is scraping this money together, the cannabis deal goes completely wrong, and everything, everyone's out a lot of money basically. So I can see what that statement's saying here. Tony was concerned about something that Pat had done which reflected on him. Now to me, they're talking about the bad cannabis importation there. So then really that leaves us with the question, doesn't it? Why was Tucker so fearful shortly before he was killed? What exactly was on Tucker's mind before Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were murdered? Was he just simply concerned about Pat Tate? Pat Tate's involvement in this deal, the money that had been taken by Pat Tate, had Pat Tate spent some of that money? Or did Tucker actually have outside investors himself for his part in the dud cannabis deal? As I say, we know that both Rolfe, Tucker and Tate invested into this deal, but we don't know exactly where this money came from. We know that Tate put some of his own money in but had a large amount of outside investment. We know that Tucker also invested in the deal to a smaller degree, but did he also have outside investors? And it's also worthy of mention that we have the phone calls on December the 6th, the day of the murders of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. And those phone calls which don't actually go to Pat Tate, they go to Tony Tucker. It's Tony Tucker's mobile phone that rings on the afternoon of December the 6th, with the calls which are supposedly to arrange the meeting for later that evening. So why do we have Tucker receiving those phone calls? Why do we have that clip that I played for you earlier with Billy Blundell saying really he didn't want to speak to Tate, he wants Tucker to turn up for this meeting? What did Tucker have to do with it? Tate is the person who owed the money. Where does Tony Tucker fit into this equation?